Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, all things Rudy Gobert. Just how much better has Rudy been since Mike Conley has joined the Wolves? We'll look at the numbers. We'll look at the two-man lineups. We'll also preview the Wolves matchup against the Philadelphia 76ers on TNT Tuesday night. It's all upcoming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch the show on Locked On Sports Minnesota. That's the Roku app or the Amazon Fire TV app. You can watch all the Minnesota Locked On podcasts. More great local sports coverage 24/7 for free. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also, of course, follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right, it's a game day. The Timberwolves take on the 76ers after having the last couple days off. They, of course, played Saturday, have a Sunday, Monday off, play tonight against the Sixers back at Target Center. It's a 6:30 p.m. tip, a bit earlier because it's the early TNT game. I do want to preview that matchup. We haven't seen the Sixers since mid-November when the Wolves beat a shorthanded Philly team in Philly. And we'll talk about that later in the show. We'll talk about what to expect in this game. The thing I'm most concerned about with this matchup, and we'll do that again at the end of the show. I want to start, though, with some Rudy Gobert talk. I mean, Rudy's been much better of late, and a lot of that can be attributed to Mike Conley's presence, I think. So I want to spend most of the show actually today breaking down a few Rudy Gobert numbers, and why Rudy has. It seems like Rudy has been so much more productive here of late for the Wolves. So let's get into that. First of all, the easiest place to start is just the overall numbers, the counting stats, the per game numbers. And sometimes I think that can frankly be a lazy way to evaluate things because counting stats can be pretty misleading in my opinion. But I do want to start there. And I think that can kind of give us like a quick and dirty snapshot of it, if you will. So Mike Conley has played 8 games with the Timberwolves. His first game in Minnesota was that game at Memphis. And Rudy has missed 1 game in that span. So Rudy and Mike Conley have played 7 games together with Conley in a Timberwolves uniform. Over those 7 games, Rudy Gobert has averaged 16.3 points and 12.6 rebounds per game. So we'll round down and up respectively to make this just easier. 16 points a game and 13 rebounds a game. 16 and 13 on 66.7% shooting. For the season, Gobert's 13.6 points, 11.6 rebounds per game. So he's averaging 2 more points and essentially 2 more rebounds per game with Mike Conley in the fold than he was before Mike Conley came to the Timberwolves. Really almost 3 more points per game and 2 rebounds more per game. The shooting percentage overall is about the same. The blocks per game, 1.4 on the season, 2 now per game. Again, that's not, the best way to measure that. Block rate's a little bit better, but he's gotten in 6 of the 7 games he's played with Conley, he's had at least 2 blocks, 2 or 3 blocks in 6 of the 7 games that Gobert has played with Conley. And I'm not at all pretending like Conley's presence is making Gobert suddenly play defense better. I don't think that's the case. I think there's a couple things at play here. So first, let's talk about the offense, because I think that's the most obvious thing. Clearly, there's a Conley-Gobert chemistry that no other Timberwolves player, certainly no other guard, has been able to muster with Rudy Gobert. And you could actually argue Karl-Anthony Towns has had the best chemistry in terms of passing connection, high-low passing connection back early at the first part of the season. Remember how impressive that was, that Towns and Gobert, Towns a lot of times towards on the perimeter would dump the ball down to Rudy, the touch passes, even lobs. Like Cat was passing the ball as good or better to Rudy. I would say certainly better than D'Angelo Russell. Like there was just more consistency there, big to big passing, than there was guards getting the ball into Rudy. Conley, however, clearly has this chemistry with Gobert from playing the last few seasons together in Utah. He's also just a really good point guard, and there's certain things that he understands that say D'Angelo Russell didn't. Like D'Lo would throw the ball at Rudy's knees and then get upset when Gobert couldn't catch it. It's just a Rudy thing. There aren't very many bigs that are going to catch the ball at their knees, right? That's in fact just the other game. I actually think it was just in the it was either the Kings game or the Lakers game. Ant threw a ball at Rudy's knees and he couldn't quite handle it. And it was a flashback to D'Lo. And, Ant's had those problems throughout the year with Gobert, but not to the extent that D'Lo did. It was a flashback to when we had Russell throwing Gobert passes on the roll where he would, throw at his ankles. Conley doesn't do that because Conley is a good point guard and a really experienced passer, knows how to pass in pick and roll game, and also knows how to play with Rudy Gobert. But again, that's not specific to Rudy. Like, find me a 7-footer that likes passes at their ankles, and I'll call you a liar. Like, there isn't one, right? That's not a thing. So Conley doesn't do that. Conley delivers the ball well to Rudy Gobert. There's also the teams have to play the Conley floater. We talked about this when Conley was first acquired by the Wolves. I spent almost a whole segment talking about this, I think, the week of the trade, is that Conley shoots that kind of trademarked, patented floater from 10, 12 feet. And, Russell didn't have a floater in his game. And while Russell was dynamic from 12, 14 feet, he could stop and pop and make a mid-range jumper with the best of them. The natural motion of a floater from Mike Conley is the same as the natural motion of a lob pass. Defenses don't know what's coming. If you play the lob, Conley's going to make a floater. If you think he's going to shoot it, he'll throw a lob to Gobert. It's that simple, and it seems really trivial, but it's not. When you're the defense and you can't tell if he's about to pass it or he's throw a lob pass or throw a floater at the rim, that makes it that much more difficult to defend. And I think that the threat of the Conley floater has opened it up for Rudy. Now, Conley struggled with the floater his first few games in Minnesota, but he's been much better the last couple. And I truly believe that's opened up the lob. And then there's also the actual the throwing of the lob itself, the mechanics of that, and throwing an accurate lob, a well-timed lob, a catchable lob, a functional lob. It's not just simply throwing a lob pass. We've seen Ant struggle with that this year, where Ant, has had flashes where it's been good, but he's also struggled to throw consistent and accurate lob passes to Rudy Gobert. Conley's really good at that too. So for all those reasons, it's opening up the game for Gobert. It's also opening things up for Conley's own shot, but it all works together on the offensive end of the floor. I think that's been really obvious. It's clear why Gobert's averaging 3 more points per game and a couple more rebounds per game. The defensive thing, the reason why the blocks have gone up, and actually the Wolves defense has been so good, that Kings game notwithstanding against the number 1 offense in the league, it's just an absolute track meet. The defense was outstanding against the Clippers and the Lakers and has had good moments. The Dallas win, of course, going back to Conley's second game in a Wolves uniform. But I think a big part of that is, well, first of all, the perimeter defense in general has improved. Even if Conley isn't the Mike Conley from 4 years ago defensively one-on-one, the overall team concept on the perimeter has gotten better. Conley is better at switching. He's better at fighting through screens. He's better at all of the above defensively than D'Angelo Russell. Even late stage career Mike Conley is better than D'Angelo Russell at all those things. But Rudy's just simply playing harder. And again, it seems so simple. But you can't tell me that Rudy Gobert doesn't look like he's playing harder, doesn't look like he's hustling harder, doesn't look like he's expecting the ball more on offense, which in turn makes you get back more aggressively on defense. It makes you contest shots more aggressively on defense. It makes you rim run in transition because you believe you're going to get the ball. You roll harder to the basket. Everything Rudy's doing is being done with more purpose than it was just a couple of weeks ago. I don't think there's any question about that. And the presence of Mike Conley has something to do with that. The numbers are up for Rudy. The defensive numbers are better for the Wolves. The block numbers are up for Rudy. It all is related to this comfort level that he has with Mike Conley. And just in general, how much better the Wolves have been, certainly over this 3-game winning streak. And with Conley in the lineup, the Wolves are overall, I believe 4-4. Yeah, 4-4 with Conley in the lineup. But they've now won 3 straight against 3 good teams, a couple really good teams, the Clippers and Kings, and another, decent team in the Lakers. So all those things work together, and it's been really, really positive. Related, I want to get into some 2-man lineups and look at that, what Rudy and Conley have looked like together so far as a 2-man lineup. So we're going to do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, then you have to try Built Bar. We're now into March, so hopefully you're still hanging on to that New Year's resolution. But my goal has still been to eat a little healthier this year. I'm doing okay, and Built Bar is a big part of that. If you're like me and you want to eat healthier, but you don't want to compromise taste, then I've got just the thing for you. You have to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't even think that they're good for you. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right. Real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter, brownie, and coconut almond. I don't know how Built does it, but these bars taste like candy bars while still maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they're actually healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein per bar. And now you don't even need to wait around to get a box. For years here on Locked On Wolves, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. You can still definitely do that, but you can also now get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, just run in and grab a 13-bar box with their hit flavors, brownie batter and churro, or again, you can still order at Built.com. Just make sure, no matter how you get your Built Bars, that you come back and thank me later. All right, let's talk about Rudy Gobert's 2-man lineup numbers this season. And I think it's a little bit illuminated. And I also think we need to talk certainly about the Conley thing. So let's start there just because we just finished talking about Conley. So let's, I guess, continue talking about Conley and Gobert. Rudy Gobert, of all of his net rating 2-man lineups this season, so the players just, I guess the easier way to say this is, the more clear way to say this is the players that, when paired with each other player individually on the Wolves, the players that he's played best with, his number, well, I'll just do this. I'll go right down the list, and we'll get to Conley pretty quickly. Number 1 in terms of net rating is Gobert with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Now, these guys have only played 35 minutes together over 5 games, so a really, really small sample size. That's a 16.8 net rating, so his best mark. So we'll kind of set that to the side for now. But I think we're going to see a lot more of that here moving forward. Yeah, Alexander Walker is going to play a lot of bench minutes with Naz Reid, but we're going to see some NA minutes with Rudy Gobert. Second on the list, Kyle Anderson. No surprise. We've talked about this at length before, and I actually think offensively just as much as defensively, the Gobert-Kyle Anderson pairing is really, really solid. Now, in terms offensively, like I think we will see, I think it's going to be more important to keep one of Anderson or Gobert on the floor with Karl-Anthony Towns. Sorry, I said that wrong. Obviously, Gobert and Towns, they're going to overlap, but not a ton. I think Anderson and Towns pairing makes more sense because Anderson's more switchable defensively and is a better defender than Towns. But I think we'll still see a lot of Anderson and Rudy together. But at any rate, Anderson and Rudy to this point are a plus 8.2 net rating, which is Rudy's second best net rating on the team. His third best is Mike Conley, and they've already played 178 minutes together, which isn't a massive sample size, but it's enough to know to continue what we already knew. If you go back and look at the Utah numbers the last few seasons with Mike and Rudy, this is a good pairing. They're a plus 6.2. Again, Gobert's third best so far this season. We'll set aside the Matt Ryan one, which is next on the list. They've only played 42 minutes together. Jordan McLaughlin and Rudy Gobert together, relatively limited, just 117 minutes. They're a plus 3.3. And then you get into Jaden McDaniels, which is a plus 1.5 in over 1,100 minutes together. And in fact, if you look at all of Rudy Gobert's positive net rating two-man lineups, almost all of them, in fact, if I asked you who the best 5 defenders on the Wolves were, just if that was the question, right? Like in a vacuum, who are the Wolves' top 5 defenders? And that's all I said to you. You would certainly say Rudy Gobert. You'd say Jaden McDaniels. You'd say Kyle Anderson. You'd say Anthony Edwards. I don't know who you'd say your 5th bet. At this point, it's probably Alexander Walker. Maybe it's Jordan McLaughlin, in some order, right? Those guys are all positive net ratings with Rudy Gobert to this point in the season. Every single one of those players. The only plus defender that's a negative net rating with Rudy Gobert right now is Taurean Prince, a minus 1.9 in 308 minutes. So for whatever that's worth, but all his other negative net ratings are poor defenders that have been on the floor with Rudy Gobert. I know Austin Rivers has a reputation of being a good defender. He hasn't been a great perimeter defender the last couple of years. He's a clear minus. Jalen Noel, a clear minus with Rudy. Interestingly, Naz Reid and Rudy are a minus 14.8, which if you throw out Nate Knight's 33 minutes that he's played with Rudy, that's his worst mark is Gobert and Naz Reid together. And that's notable because what happens when Karl-Anthony Towns comes back? And we've talked about this a little bit, and we have to talk about it in earnest now with Towns. I don't know. We keep saying in the next couple of weeks. I mean, hopefully here in the next couple of weeks, Towns will return to practice at least. But if and when Towns comes back, like Towns and Gobert are going to start together, right? So who does Naz play with? You would assume that Naz would get some of the backup 4 minutes next to Rudy, but perhaps it's a true three big rotation where, Towns and Rudy are each playing 30 to 32 minutes and maybe Naz is playing 20 to 24. That's probably what happens. But the Naz and Rudy minutes together have not been great. And again, that's 147 minutes. So not a massive sample, but still negative 14.8 is, not good. For argument's sake, let's pull up the Towns. So Towns and Naz have only played 48 minutes together this year, a painfully small sample, but it's been a negative 20.7. Naz has, and this has been a theme over the course of his 4 seasons in the NBA, nearly 4 seasons. Naz is best cast as a 5. His minutes at the 4 have not been ultra successful. Part of that's because he's a mediocre rebounder as is. He's been much better this year, but as a big, he also isn't super switchable defensively. While he's a good off-ball, weak side shot blocker, he's had moments, and certainly early in his career before he lost, he slimmed down a little bit, became a little bit more agile and nimble on the perimeter where Naz wasn't switchable at all. So I think a lot of that has to do with his defense. But Naz is best cast as a backup 5. So how does that look if he's playing some 4? Or does he strictly play the 5 and really only play with Cat? And then when Rudy's on the floor, Cat's on the floor, it's Rudy and Kyle Anderson at the 4, and Naz only plays the 5 with Cat at the 4. And Cat really, in that scenario, only plays the 4 moving forward. Is that a possibility? I'll be really interested to see how Chris Finch breaks that all down. But the Gobert 2-man lineups really kind of underscore the idea that, hey, it's best to have Rudy on the floor with strong switchable perimeter defenders. You can play Rudy and drop. You can, if Rudy's not, you can play him and drop. He can kind of roam the back line in general if there's not pick and roll. If you're not involving him in pick and roll in the action, just have these rangy defenders, the Jaden McDaniels, the Anthony Edwards, the Kyle Anderson in terms of length and intelligence, but not necessarily athleticism, of course. But that's the best thing to do with Rudy Gobert, and it hasn't been these dynamic offensive players who have been the ones. Now, of course, your best defenders a lot of times are some of your best offensive players, like Anthony Edwards, for instance. But the Rudy data is really, really interesting. And like we talked about first segment, Conley has certainly given that a boost for Rudy Gobert. And reintegrating Karl-Anthony Towns at some point over the course of the month of March will be pretty interesting to watch. And is this the new Rudy? Like, is the new Rudy the old Rudy, right? And old as in like Utah Jazz Rudy? Are we going to see the same Rudy we saw in a Jazz uniform versus the November, December, January version of Timberwolves Rudy Gobert? Has Conley really, truly unlocked that? If nothing else, in terms of familiarity and confidence, is that going to breed success in terms of Gobert individually and the Wolves as a whole? It's going to be fascinating to watch. All right, let's close the show here today by previewing Wolves Sixers. That's Tuesday night's game on TNT. We have not seen this matchup since November, so we're going to do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is past us now, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Wolves Sixers on Tuesdays, a great opportunity to get involved on FanDuel. You can look at the point spread. You can do money line. You can just look at the points total, individual player props, Joel Embiid. I don't know what free throws made is, but like check the over on that. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Embiid versus the Timberwolves, or the Sixers in general versus the Wolves. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. Don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's talk Wolves Sixers. So the Timberwolves have not seen the Philadelphia 76ers since mid-November. That was a road game in Philly. The Timberwolves had, at the moment, came into that game at 7-8. They were on the stretch of facing what turned out to be pretty shorthanded teams. They faced like the Magic without Banchero. There was another one in there. And then they go to face Philly, and James Harden had been out for a couple of weeks at the time. Tyrese Maxey got hurt just before the game. Joel Embiid, of course, did play for the Sixers in the last matchup against the Wolves. But besides Embiid, like this was Daniel House was starting. Shake Milton was starting for them, and he is not typically a starter. Like this was just no Maxey, no Harden. It was the Embiid show. And the Wolves ended up winning. This was a game the Wolves led by 12 at halftime. Philly kind of came back in the fourth quarter a little bit, and actually it came down to the last second. The Wolves only won by 3. But it's still a nice win, right? Anytime you win at Philadelphia and against Joel Embiid, it's a good game. In that game, Embiid had 32, 9, and 6 against the Wolves, but he also turned it over 6 times. He shot just 6 of 15 from the floor, but attempted 20 free throws. Joel Embiid did. More on that in a minute. Shake Milton also had 27 and 6 in this game, 10 of 15 shooting. They got 19 from DeAnthony Melton as well. And then 15 off the bench from George Niang. The Timberwolves in that game, of course, still had Karl-Anthony Towns, but he had a quiet game, 12 and 8 against his nemesis Embiid. Ant had 25 on 21 shots, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 of 10 outside the arc. Not super efficient, but he did make all 9 of his free throw attempts. D'Lo was second in scoring for the Wolves with 19 plus 7 assists, and then 13 off the bench for Jalen Noel. Gobert had just 8 and 13 in that matchup. Since then, Philly, of course, has been fantastic. At the time, they were only 500. They're 42 and 22 on the season now. So actually, since that point, they've gone, 34 and 14 since the last time the Wolves saw the Sixers. They've won a couple straight. They also snapped that 16-game win streak for the Bucks the other day and then beat the Pacers on Monday night. So this is the second night of a back-to-back for the Sixers, and they're on the road too. So the Wolves have been home since Saturday. They were off at home Sunday, Monday. The Sixers are on the 5th game of a road trip, one at Milwaukee, then went to the Pacers and won Monday night. So now the second night of a back-to-back on the road. In general, they had lost 3 out of 4 just prior to beating the Bucks. They had lost at the Mavericks, at home against the Heat and Celtics, and Sandro Sharonda win at Miami to kick off this road trip that, again, is now 5 games in. So the schedule favors the Wolves in this regard. The Wolves should be well-rested compared to the Sixers. The Sixers have had a couple guys that are banged up and that actually missed their game in Indiana on Monday night. Let's see. So PJ Tucker did not play. He started last time out against the Wolves in November. Tobias Harris did not play as well for Philly. But Embiid, Harden, Maxey all played. Embiid had 42 points in the win over the Pacers on Monday night. This was a 147-143 game. Did not go overtime. Every team scored 29 or more points, both teams scored at least 29 points in all 4 quarters in this game. It's just insane. So 42 from Embiid, 19 of 19 on free throw attempts for Joel Embiid in this game. Took 16 shots from the field, made 11 of them. Maxey had 24. Harden struggled, 14 points on 11 shots, but he had 20 assists to only 1 turnover. James Harden did in 40 minutes in this game. The Sixers are such an incredibly just strange team. Just a really, really strange team. The thing that scares me the most about this matchup, though, is that the Sixers are number 1 in the NBA in free throw rate. They're also number 1 in free throw percentage. They attempt 20, so free throw attempts to a little over 25 per game, but they don't play at a very fast pace. So their free throw rate, their free throws per field goal attempt is number 1 in the league, which is 0.25. So for essentially 1 out of every 4 field goal attempts, they're attempting a free throw. They're 3rd in actual free throw rate, which is slightly different. But no matter how you slice it, they're one of the top 5 teams in the league in terms of attempting free throws. They're number 1 in percentage, 83.2%, at the free throw line. Embiid averages almost 12 free throw attempts per game and shoots 85% at the line. And again, he shot 20 against the Wolves in November. He shot 19 on Monday night in Indianapolis against the Pacers. And the Wolves, as Wolves fans know, are miserable at keeping opponents off the free throw line. In fact, opponent free throw rate is 23rd in the league, meaning the Wolves are the 8th worst team at allowing opponents to get to the line. That is the biggest issue with this matchup. The Sixers get to the line. The Wolves allow teams to get to the line. We talked about Embiid. I mean, Harden's free throw rate's actually down a little. He averages about 6.5 free throw attempts per game, but that's still a ton of free throw attempts. The fact that James Harden averages nearly 12 free throw attempts a game, Joel Embiid averages nearly 12 free throw attempts per game is just insane. If Karl-Anthony Towns, I mean, like, he could only dream of getting half the whistle that Joel Embiid gets. It's just incredible. And so no doubt we'll see plenty of complaints from the Timberwolves, as we often do anyway. But, in this particular game, I think we'll see a lot of that. Tyrese Maxey is just a dynamic offensive player. I mean, it's mostly scoring. He's not, he's third in assists per game on this team behind Embiid and Harden. But he's a 20-point per game scorer, 46% from the field, just a shade under 40% from three. So that's something to keep an eye on. The Sixers are also a good defensive team. They're top 10 in both defensive and offensive rating. So the Wolves won't have an easy time offensively either. They're just a really solid team. And they've mostly been playing well lately too. Of course, the win at Milwaukee the other night was really impressive. So number one key for the Wolves is to not get into foul trouble for multiple reasons, but also to just not let the Sixers get easy trips to the free throw line. Also defending the three-point line. The Sixers are 12th in three-point rate. They're second in three-point percentage. Harden's over 40%, having one of the best shooting seasons of his career, certainly from deep. Tobias Harris, 38%. Maxey, D'Anthony Melton, both around 40%. George Niang, 40%. Like, this is a team that knocks down three-point attempts. They knock down free throws. In a lot of ways, the perfect squad for an analytically minded team. They also, by the way, have Jalen McDaniels. Of course, they acquired him at the deadline. Current brother of Jaden McDaniels on the Timberwolves. So that'll be interesting too, to see those guys on the court together again. This is a really deep Sixers team. They kind of retooled a bit, more just their depth, their bench at the deadline. But it's a really deep team, and it's an opportunity for the Wolves to, play another good team and beat another good team. This is national TV, TNT, 6:30 Tuesday night. It's a really good opportunity for Minnesota. And as we've said all season, the Wolves play to their competition. So you play a good team. If this trend holds true, the Wolves should play well against a good team. With this rest too, this rest advantage as well. Hopefully the Wolves take advantage of that and don't simply, hopefully the Wolves are in a mindset where they're not still on their break. They also get 2 more days of rest after this too, by the way. The Wolves don't play again until Friday. So Wednesday, Thursday off before Friday night's game home. I think it's Brooklyn. So if the Wolves can stay focused, this is a winnable game against a good team, and it should be a ton of fun. We'll, of course, do the post-game podcast. We'll do the live postcast with Marnie Gellner. That'll be almost right after the game this time around, actually. Bally Sports is not carrying the game because it's on TNT. So Marnie will go live with me 10, 15 minutes after the final horn. And then we'll also do the full post-game podcast that we'll post Wednesday morning. So be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota to find out when we go live Tuesday night after the game. And then you can find the post-game podcast as well on this audio channel Wednesday morning. A big thank you to those of you that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, you can find the show free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Also on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Now make your second listen the Game to Game NBA podcast. Every moment, every top performance, and every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.